recording. Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah Barrett Neal, Gallery Manager with the Glen Arbor Arts Center. Today, as part of the Art Center's Everyday Object exhibition, I'm in conversation with Leelanau County artist Steve Palmer, maker of fish. Steve's worked in a variety of media. Now his focus is on the mixed media fish he invents from found and antique objects. A former school educator of 32 years, his fish offer a teachable moment about his use of things that might otherwise be discarded. So let's get started. Hi, Steve.
Hi.
Before we begin, I'm going to get one of your fish up here. Let's see, we're gonna do this guy. So with William H. Harris, Sawtooth, as a background, explain your work a little bit. Give us an overview of the process, how you start developing ideas and designing a fish, and how you source your materials.
Okay, that's a big question, Sarah. So this is one of my bigger fish. This one is, I call it a sawtooth for obvious reasons. This fish it starts with a wood crutch. You can kind of see that now that you look for it. So it's about 6 foot long. The wood crutch in this case is a whole crutch. A lot of my fish, I use parts of crutches. And then of course the two saw blades. The curved saw blades are actually kind of hard to find. The one on the top, not so hard to find. These of course have screwdrivers for a fin. The fin is frequently the most defining part of a fish. So as you show some more examples, you'll see how that is. Then the eye and the tail. In this case, the tail is a cut coat hanger. And then the inside of the fish is kind of where a lot of the detail goes into it. This one has a lot of pieces that kind of go left to right. I kind of found a batch of these Wonder Bread rulers, which this one has one in there, which is kind of fun to find. It has a lot of smaller pieces, a lot of antique pieces. You asked where I find pieces, and I find them all sorts of places. When we travel, we stop in antique stores, which is an easy place to find pieces, a little more expensive. I find pieces on eBay. That's a confession. But the more unique places, the best places when I have friends that are always looking for me. It's a hobby that a lot of my friends have. They go to garage sales or their family and friends, and they're going through their attics or whatever, they'll find stuff. In fact, I'm visiting a friend in Petoskey tomorrow. She found some old crutches, and old crutches are hard to find. The ones that are kind of have a single peg at the bottom instead of an old adjustable peg. More than you need to know, I know. Another source is I have people that are actual pickers that go and that are professional pickers and go out and look for a specific list of items that I have. So those are my typical sources of materials. You know, the most garage sales, and we just had one this weekend, are filled with kind of, I hate to say it, crappy plastic items. And I like older items that are more wood or metal. And those are not what you typically find in antique store in garage sales these days.
The interior of the fish, let's refer to it as its stomach, for lack of a better term, in your fish is a nice little area for doing a number of things. So I'm assuming you're not trying to replicate or suggest the contents of the fish's stomach after a meal, but are you thinking about other things in terms of design and composition and color when you're choosing items to go in there? Or are you trying to communicate a message with the fish's stomach contents?
Yes, 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 and yes. Um, in this case, you'll notice the lower part of the fish tends to have bigger, and the chest part of the fish have bigger items, which is more like a fish actually has. The chest and gut are larger parts of fish. So that does kind of replicate an actual fish. So there's a big pickup sticks container at the bottom of this fish. There's a croquet piece, mallet piece, head at the top of the fish. And those kind of make, and of course the spice tin, that makes up kind of the larger pieces in the chest and the gut of the fish. And then, yes, there are smaller pieces that kind of fill out the rest of the fish. Sometimes I do go by color. Sometimes I do have fish that are made for certain purposes. I'll make a fish for a physician, for example, and I'll use items that are more for that profession. And that's kind of fun to make. In fact, I have a couple coming over today, and they're going to commission a fish. I don't know what profession they have, but they may want to have certain items in their fish. Sometimes it's a personal thing. You know, they have some personal items. I had a woman I made a pair of fish for her, and she wanted them to be two distinctly different fish. She wanted to hang them up and down, which is very rare. She wanted them to be hanging opposite, different fins, different eyes, but she wanted to have certain things from her personal life included inside the fish. So those are kind of fun things to do that make the interior of the fish look different. So a lot of times that's the playground for me as the artist on the fish, is the inside of the fish.
It does give you a lot of latitude for interpretation and exploration.
It does. If you look at the fish, if you were to kind of take a closer look at there, most of those items, if you look at it two-dimensionally, are smaller, rectangular. They're not odd-shaped pieces because they just don't tend to fit together very well.
This is something we talked about earlier in one of our conversations, and you hinted at it in something you just said a moment ago. There's a lot of stuff in the world, and that might suggest that in terms of your work, you never have to worry about a supply problem. True or false?
Well, there's a lot of stuff in the world, and there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown into landfills, which is a little bit upsetting. Most of these things are, some things are easy to find. Like, you know, the spice tins, I can still find those pretty easily. Those wood handled screwdrivers are getting a little harder to find, but I can still find them fairly easily. It's surprising to me right now. I cannot find those wood coat hangers, the thick wood coat hangers that I use for the tail. I'm struggling to find those. The curved saw blades for the mouth, those are harder to find. The old wood crutches that have the non-adjustable leg at the bottom are hard to find. But a lot of the other things are pretty easy to find. Some of the knick-knacky things are easy to find. So it's a mixed bag, you know, and I don't want to use some of the like I said, the plasticky things. And I could fill up a ton of fish with the junk, but I don't want to do that.
Why, for instance, would a curved saw blade be harder to find? Is it a matter of age, era?
Well, there's less produced, for example. The size of them, they tend to be a little more expensive to begin with. And I don't know. I can find them new, and I just haven't gotten into kind of faking that they're old by making them rusty and stuff. I've done that a little bit, and this just doesn't look the same. So I like them genuinely old, which makes it harder. But if you look on eBay, a lot of times they'll charge 50, 75, 80, $100 for them. And that's just crazy. So I'm not quite sure why those are so hard to find, except that people like to hold on to things.
I suppose some objects go in and out of fashion in terms of what's collectible and what's not.
You're probably right. I know sometimes when I've sold these things, I mean, I used to do a number of art fairs, and I've had some collectors come up and say, "Oh my God, you have a Pez dispenser in there that's worth $60." And I didn't know that, but it's kind of fun.
Let me put another one of your creations up on the screen. There's Tiger. Tell us about Tiger.
Okay, Tiger is unique. This is another crutch. This is a very unusual crutch. The one that has the flanged mouth opening like that. In this case, I took the armrest off, which would be at the on the right side of the mouth is where the armrest would have been. So I took that part off. On the far left side, again, has a coat hanger for a tail. Again, a coat hanger. This one has a mixture of 1-foot rulers for a fin. Lately, I've been liking that look for some reason. I go in stages where I like different fins. This one has, I don't know how many teeth. In this case, these are wooden knitting needles, tons and tons of wooden knitting needles, and they're densely packed in there. And that's kind of a fun, almost scary look on that one, which kind of adds the name Tiger on there. I should mention that all the fish are named after something that's inside the fish. So when you see a bunch of them together, if you're a kid or a kid at heart, it's kind of fun to look at and kind of figure out how they got their names. In this case, it's pretty easy because that little white block there and kind of in the middle of it says Tiger. So this one has that big tannish piece there in the middle. That's part of a tennis racket.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of a little different. And it has, again, just a lot of little pieces in there. It has a large screwdriver. Almost all my fish have 2 things in common besides some of the attributes. They almost all have a screwdriver toward the end of the tail. And they almost all have a spice tin in it. In this case, this one doesn't have a spice tin, but it has a little a tin at the bottom that says split. I forget what it says. It has for fishing. It has a little fishing tin at the bottom there. So they all have some type of tin in it, and they all have a screwdriver or something similar in there. And that kind of makes all the fish come from some type of family.
In terms of the design process, are you a sketcher, or is the assembly of each of these creations more an intuitive thing?
Good question. So I have about 10 different styles of fish. And so the birth of a style of fish takes some time and a lot of different kind of thinking. And that's where the birthing process takes more time. Once I've kind of, a style has evolved, they don't take as much work in figuring out how to put the pieces together. For example, this one, I kind of know what the general shape is going to be. So I usually will work on a few fish at a time. And so I will put the back on, I'll do the fin, I'll do the teeth, I'll do the tail, I'll do the eye, and then I'll do the inside. The inside sometimes will cause some problems because I want things to look a certain way. I don't bother. I've never sketched that out. But sometimes finding the right piece, and a lot of times there's layers on layers here. And so I like things to look dense. I want it to look full. I don't like to have any bare spots. So having pieces fit together is sometimes complicated, but that's more of puzzling it together as opposed to design and drawing it out.
I wonder if your fish give you an opportunity to talk with people, or if people bring up the question of why you repurpose or recycle objects, and does it ever go beyond that about all the things in the world there are to be recycled or reused?
Well, one of the nice things about doing art fairs, again, I haven't done any for a couple of years, was to have more conversations with people. That was actually one of my prime motivations for doing art fairs, is I get to see what attracted people to the art. You'd see people walk by the tent and their heads would turn and they would zoom in, and sometimes on a specific fish. Or they'd stand back and they'd laugh, or they'd, a lot of times it would be kids. The kids would draw the parents in. So I miss that. And that would bring on the conversations like you're talking about. Frequently, the conversations would be more mundane than the ones you're asking. It would be more about how do you source your materials? How do they have their names? Those type of questions. The questions that are more deep about what are we doing to our environment? Why these materials? Why are they all old? That type of things happen, but not very frequently. But those are the good conversations, and those happen from time to time.
How has this work influenced or affected the way you look at the material world? Is the material world just one big art supply store to you, or a problem in need of correction?
Yes, both. My wife and I visit our recycling center probably twice a week. We recycle massive amounts of stuff. There are weeks that we have almost nothing in our garbage bin. And we compost out back. So we have very little trash. I'll say this week was an exception because we had our largest garage sale ever. And we got rid of a ton of stuff, but even that was one bin of garbage. So we are pretty careful about trash, and that's just a personal thing. And it bothers us when we see people that just do not recycle. That's just very personal to us. So recycling is important, and as a country, when we see all the massive amounts of waste that's out there is upsetting to us. We do donate a portion of our income we receive from our fish to some local charities, not recycling, but to Fishtown and to some nature conservancy, because we need to give back to our earth. We need to take care of the planet we live on. And the other half of your question is yes, there is so much out there, and it is all potential art materials, and there is a lot out there. We take walks, and my wife particularly will see something on the ground, and she'll pick it up and say, "We can use this for artwork." And we were much worse about that than we are now. We're better about picking up stuff because there's just so much out there that it's just tempting to pick up everything and use it, or try to use it. And we're trying not to do that as much, but it's tempting to there's just so much out there.
There is indeed, but you found a lovely way to address part of it and turn the amount of waste into a life-affirming activity, which creative work is all about. So I'm going to stop the share, and it's just you and me again. Steve, thanks so much for your time today. If people want to look at more of your work, how do they do that?
Well, it would be easy to look at my website. That's runningdogstudio.com. That's one way to do it. They can always stop by our studio. We live here in Leelanau County between Traverse City and Suttons Bay. They can call and come on over. I have artwork in about 20 galleries around the country. We had about 40, and that was too much. And I'd rather do fewer, and then actually trying to cut down a few more so I can just pay better attention to those that I work with. I have a show coming up at a couple places, so I'm having 3 pieces up in. I was a featured artist for Dart for Art up at Crooked Tree for their 21st Dart celebration. So this is their 50th anniversary at Crooked Tree, and they're having a retrospective of their featured artists. So I have 3 pieces going in for a summer show that starts in about a week. So I'm taking those pieces up there. So they can see those there, and they can always just contact me.
You're one busy guy for a retired guy.
Yes.
Retired from the first part of your career.
This is much more enjoyable. I loved it my career, but I love this better.
And that's a nice thing to be able to say about one's work.
Yes.
The Everyday Objects exhibition is an exploration of the many ways creative people, much like Steve, turn common and familiar objects into the extraordinary. It's on view in the GAAC gallery through October 28, and you can look at it online by going to glenarborart.org. Click on the exhibits tab. There you'll find this conversation and other conversations with makers whose work is linked to everyday objects. Thanks again, Steve. Thanks to all of you who've watched the video, and we'll see you next time.